When one takes a look at modern-day Western culture, it doesn't take long to notice what has become the ideals of society. Different types of media engrave sex and consumerism into one's brain from a young age. Advertisements, such as those from fast food chain Arby's, confuse young people's minds by intertwining a product with sexual connotations. Other ads use fancy cars and material wealth to influence a consumer. The result is people living their lives for the purpose of these pleasures. Young people are increasingly wanting to be doctors not for the sake of helping people, but to make a lot of money. People are also increasingly joining the gym not to get healthy, but out of vanity and sexual desire. The novel, A Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, provides an excellent example of a man who becomes completely hedonistic and falls into ruin because of it. After being magically intertwined with a painting, the main character, Dorian, no longer appears to age. Instead, a portrait begins to take on the consequences of his life choices. For a person with a fixed moral compass, this may not have been the worst thing, but for Dorian, this became an issue due to his life choices as influenced by another character, Lord Henry. Early on in the story, Henry convinces Dorian that he must live out his beauty to the fullest. He states on page 36, "When your youth goes, your beauty will go with it, and then you will suddenly discover that there are no more triumphs left for you, or have to content yourself with those mean triumphs that the memory of your past will make more bitter than defeats. Every month as it wanes brings you nearer to something dreadful. Time is jealous of you, and wars against your lilies and your roses. You will become sallow and hollow-cheeked and dull-eyed. You will suffer horribly." This statement is incredibly manipulative, indicating that discovering new pleasure is the only way to make new triumphs, and that growing old means simply remembering pleasures of the past. This is inherently wrong, as pleasurable things fade over time, and it is common to find more moral things to give one pleasure as they grow old. Normally, most people get out of these hedonistic ideas while they are young, and then move on to things that leave one content over a long time, such as family and faith. But for Dorian, who had a timeless youth, he could indulge as long as he wanted to. This made him content for a long time, but one of the ways in which pleasure brings us joy is that it is new. This is particularly the case with the physical pleasure Dorian was after. Eventually, his pleasures stopped fulfilling him, and he could no longer bear the image of his soul. The ensuing mental crisis consumed Dorian. Another novel, Against Nature, by Joris Karl Huysman, depicts a mental breakdown of its main character through the pursuit of aesthetic pleasure. In this story, the protagonist, Dessessant, rejects society, retiring to an isolated house to undergo sensory experiences. He collects anything from perfumes to flowers to literature. The writing itself seems to have no direction or plot, simply just documenting the different attempts of the protagonist to seek aesthetic pleasure. Perhaps this is a commentary on the pursuit of these false pleasures. Just as the story seems to have little direction, pursuing physical pleasure and beauty is something that does not lead anywhere. Eventually, living without purpose will catch up to one's mind. This begins to occur in the latter half of the story when Dessessant's physical and mental health begin to decline. As this happens, he begins trying various methods to cure his illnesses, but to no avail. Eventually, for fear of his life, he returns to society in Paris to give up his aesthetic pursuit of perfection. This story, just like the previous, seems to be a commentary on the pursuit of aesthetic and surface-level pleasure. The pleasure pursued in the stories, physical beauty for Dorian, material perfection for Dessessant, and sexual desires for both, resulted in the pair of protagonists failing to have families and isolating themselves from any meaningful relationship. The result was that both Dorian Gray and Dessessant felt discontent with life and had mental crises. One real-world example of the issues these pursuits can cause is the drastic difference between the 1960s and the 1970s of the U.S. The 1960s saw economic prosperity the likes of which have never been seen. The expansion of technology, housing, and automobiles led to the rise of suburbia and consequently an expansion of consumerism. Sexual values also changed tremendously, with more people being open to straying away from traditional Christian sexual behavior. Birth control advances contributed to this, as well as sex becoming more prominent in songs and media. Marilyn Monroe, a celebrity portrayed in Hollywood films with clear sex appeal, allegedly having relations with President Kennedy, was perhaps the best symbol of the changing sexual times. Times were good in the 60s, but were followed by an extreme economic and social malaise in the 70s. The American spirit was in crisis, as stated by President Carter in his speech, Energy and the National Goals, a Crisis of Confidence. This was delivered in 1979. During that speech, he explained exactly how pursuit of material pleasures is not sustainable for one's happiness. He states, "In a nation that was proud of hard work, strong families, close-knit communities, and our faith in God, too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption. Human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but by what one owns. But we've discovered that owning things and consuming things does not satisfy our longing for meaning. We've learned that piling up material goods cannot fill the emptiness of lives which have no confidence or purpose." The alternative, Carter states, that will lead us back to success and happiness is work, family, and community, rather than materialism. To close, it is important to note that there is nothing wrong with things like sex, beauty, or wealth. When kept in moderation, like everything, physical pleasures are quite good. The danger lies in the fact that our society is inundated with these pleasures. One must navigate these pleasures with discipline as to not let them take over their life. Completely conforming to materialism, beauty, and sexual pleasure can lead one to having existential issues with purpose and meaning.